Okay, so today we are on the air with the excellent, amazing, effeminate degenerate, also known as Lapis. So, Lapis, how are you today?
Oh, I'm feeling pretty great. It's been a good day. It's a very interesting time, a turbulent time in history, and I don't know. I'm just in a place where I'm happy to be alive right now.
That is fantastic to hear. And I am in a pretty right place today as well. I mean, the football could have gone better. My team lost 3-0 and were terrible. But, apart from that, all good. Uh, and yeah, no, it's a very politically important time at the moment, as I'm sure we'll discuss in a second.
Yeah.
In fact, let's start with something like that today. What sort of has piqued your interest of late, do you feel?
So something that caught my attention lately, and this is, I think I kind of want to start from small and then build up to the more important. Something that caught my attention lately was the behavior of Lindsay Lohan that she posted on Instagram.
Hmm. And do elaborate on what Miss Lohan did.
Yeah. So, as I'm sure everyone remembers, Lindsay Lohan was a star that didn't ever happen. Like, she was pretty famous for her role in the movie Mean Girls, but ever since then, her career kind of sputtered out. She got really into drugs. She crashed cars, and she converted to Islam. Um, but something really bizarre happened lately. So she posted this video on Instagram talking to a refugee family in Russia that were living on the street. And she said to the mother and the father, "Let me take your children. I'll bring them back to my hotel and they can watch a movie." And at first the mother was like, "Okay," but then the father was like, "No." And so Lindsay Lohan said, "Oh, I'll take the mother as well." But the father still said no. And Lindsay Lohan said that, "Oh, you should accept me. You should let me take your children because I'm trying to do what's best for them. Opportunities like this don't come around very often." And she was speaking in a kind of like, the way she was speaking English was in a very kind of bad imitation of how Arabs speak English.
Like patronizing.
Well, she was like speaking a bit like this.
Oh,
And
so almost like a mockery.
Yeah, but I'm not, anyway. And then when the refugee family was like, "Okay, this lady's obviously crazy," they got their things together and they're trying to walk away. And Lindsay Lohan accused the parents of being child traffickers, and she said, "You're an embarrassment to Arab culture." Um, and she tried to like grab the children, and she was only stopped when the mother punched her, and then she was left crying in the street to her
That
followers, like, "What did I do wrong?"
that sounds very absurd. Um, I mean, it just, it stinks of the whole, entitlement and
Mhm.
oh, what was that? Was that just your audio looping?
Yeah, just a second. Like the audio hit in and then I muted it. So we won't have to bother with that.
Um, well, yeah, no, it sounds very much like the typical attitude of liberal type people who, tend to be quite flush with privilege, think they're doing a great job by sort of, having basic awareness of poverty and stuff, and of people who are of lesser wealth than them, but seem to, in the same process, dehumanize a lot of these
Mhm.
people, and expect them to just act like as though their charity is not insulting and
Yeah.
de what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, just insulting and really quite mocking in a way, because imagine having your kids taken like that and said, "Oh, I'll provide for you with the wealth that they haven't really earned." Because
Mhm.
if we look at it through an anti-capitalist lens,
Yeah.
Lindsay Lohan's wealth is fine, she's acted, but the films, the company that distributes it, all that stuff has been the result of labor of people around the world.
Mhm.
um, so for her to have all these, these nice apartments, these hotels, this millionaire lifestyle, while this
Yeah.
family are probably never going to see a fraction of that wealth
Mhm.
in their lifetime, and for her to show up and be like, "Oh, I'm going to help you. You need my help. Take my help."
Yeah.
And then imagine being a mother and having your kids taken off you, and essentially you don't know what's going to happen to them. You don't know how they're being treated. All you know is that, oh, there's a hotel, there's games, there's TV. It's like
It
it's a
sounds
very
such a like a child, like a predator.
yeah, exactly like a predator. It's not good enough really for someone to expect to be treated nicely by offering them that, because what does that say? It says, like you said, oh, come with me, come and take your kids away, like predatory. um and especially her getting punched is like, it's not surprising. Like, what would anyone do if their kids were being dragged away by some stranger? I mean, did they know who Lindsay Lohan is? I wouldn't recognize Lindsay Lohan if I saw her in the street.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had kids and someone was trying to put them away from me, yeah, I'd bat them away as well. And frankly, the fact that it's Lindsay Lohan and not someone who's not of public attention, or it's not famous, is sort of, she's lucky in that respect, because imagine if it was just someone else, like someone who no one had heard of, there wouldn't be any.
Gotten no attention.
Exactly. She's lucky to not have experienced worse than what she did, and she shouldn't be feeling like, oh, I'm a victim here. She should be thinking, wow, I went up to someone, patronized them, mocked them to a degree, tried to take their kids, and now I'm trying to portray it as, oh, I'm a victim, I'm the nice person doing it.
Mm-hmm.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and another thing about Lindsay Lohan's behavior was, I thought, kind of the way that she thought she had an ownership over Arab and Muslim culture because she was a convert to Islam. How she kind of thought that her like insulting facsimile, was doing anything but, being condescending and rude to the Arab people who she was supposedly trying to help. And how she immediately accused them, when they didn't, go along with her whims, of being, betraying Arab culture. Like, what gives her, like, this white actress who basically converted to Islam because it's a fad in Hollywood to convert to different religions? What gives her an ownership over Arab culture? What gives her the right to dictate, what Arab culture is and what Arab culture isn't?
Well, it's just like, it's quite insulting, like you say, to essentially go along with it because it's cool. It's like, oh, I'm a liberal, I'm gonna, I'm so accepting. And then showing up over there with the wealth you've inherited through all this, stuff that's been beneficial to you that a lot of these people are never going to see. And then, sort of parade it around like, oh yeah, I'm gonna make your kids great. It's insulting. It's only insulting to them, but also the families who didn't, like, why that family, just because they happened to come across them. And then not only that, you've got the element of almost, what's it called? I've lost the word again. I'm a little bit tired. Oh gosh.
Appropriation?
Sort of. I think ignorance. The idea, oh, Arab culture, like it's all just one big thing. Like, oh, we have to present ourselves a certain way to fit with the West. It's insulting. It's taking a people of a very diverse and widespread group of people, because it's not like the Middle East is just one unique group. It's massively diverse. And they weren't even in the Middle East, like you say, they're in Russia, right? So I guess there are parts of Russia that extend down to like Georgia and stuff, but it's not as uniform as just saying the Arab culture is. And she's there, sort of an ignorant white person in truth, with privilege and with a clearly class privilege. Also, racially, they have privilege, white people. And you're showing up and being like, oh yeah, I'm your savior. I'm gonna help your kids. Come with me. It's insulting.
It's totally that. It's totally like a white savior complex. Like, she was dictating how she gets to help them on her terms, instead of being like, obviously you need help, what can I do for you? It's like, no, I already know what's best for you. Here's what you have to do for me. Give me your kids. I know what's best. You don't.
And especially, I think the word I was looking for is liberal feminism. It's the, I'm going to do this nice thing and you're going to accept it and you're going to like it because it's nice, right? Everyone likes, luxuries and stuff. it doesn't cut down to the actual problems, which is that, oh, there's class and racial and gender oppression. There's all these different layers of inequality which exist for these people, which are, they need more than just, oh, they happen to chance across a nice
Yeah.
activist who happens to have a nice hotel room just off the way, which they'll happily take their kids to.
Yeah.
It ignores the structural problems. It doesn't take much thinking about it to realize that, oh, Lindsay Lohan jetting around the world helping one or two children isn't really that good.
Yeah.
And if she wasn't going to get any attention for it on social media, would she have done this? Would she have charitably helped out, charitably given these kids a room and stuff? No, she's probably using it to take a nice picture and be like, oh,
I'm a photo op now. Here, that can help me restart my career.
Exactly, yeah. There's so much, cynicism about it. And the fact that as well, if a family, fine, maybe she's that unaware of like social norms and just thought, oh, let's take this family's kids and put them in a hotel. Once a mother and father say, no, what are you thinking? Who then puts that on social media? Like, who, even if when she got hit, that's not something that, is unexpected. If anyone has their kids try to be snatched away from them, especially by someone who's insulting and demeaning you and sort of speaking down to you, like the rich Westerner saying, "Oh, you don't know what's good for you. You're hurting your culture and stuff." Why would you put that on the internet? Why would you, show this? I mean, was it Lindsay Lohan who uploaded the video?
She was live streaming with her phone on Instagram.
Well, that's even worse because it's why would you show this to your audience?
Well, unless you wanted social approval.
Exactly.
And if you look at the comments, like throughout the video, there's a lot of like white women with nice dressed pictures in the background being like, oh, Lindsay's such a goddess. Oh, she's so wonderful. And that's obviously what she wanted. It's obvious that she did it for like this ego stroke thing. And it just went badly wrong because, the refugee family refused to play along. They demanded a bit more human dignity. And they obviously saw what Lindsay Lohan was doing and like it seemed predatory.
Yeah, it's a byproduct of the Western hegemony that we see, or the West often sees other cultures as inferior, as spectacles, as, oh, this is the place where people are poor and they're all not as culturally enriched as us, and they don't have awareness of modern life and stuff. And there's such insulting and simplified view of things, ignoring the economic superiority we have. Leads to people like Lindsay Lohan who think it's whether she is being cynical and just wants a social strata, or whether she genuinely does think that parading parading around with a phone, like trying to take your kids away and, oh, I'm gonna give them a nice hotel with food and stuff, whether that is what she genuinely thinks counts for doing a good thing. Because you can imagine if you've got all that wealth, maybe put some of it back into those communities. Do something more than just some insulting, like kidnapping kids away, basically. And that's the thing as well. Like even ignoring all the the cultural things, what parent is happy with their kids just going off with a complete stranger with in another like they're not even from the same country as you, but you might never see them again.
And especially considering that this is like these are people who are living in a very marginalized position in Russian society. They're refugees, they're Muslims, they're living on the street. Like this is pretty much as low as like this is like the bottom of the hierarchy in Russia. Like Putin is, targets Russians, he targets refugees and immigrants. He and he's recently cut pensions, so he targets the lower classes as well. So to just expect that someone who is, at such a low status, had in such a nasty, awful place, is just going to not read suspicion into your behavior, is going to like naively let some white wealthy woman carry their children away, is just arrogance.
Arrogance, ignorance, the elements of racism and sort of classism as well. The idea that these people are so unaware that we're just grateful to have the basics of life. Because it's not like these people are born yesterday.
Yeah.
for want of a better phrase. Um, you know, it's like we've said, just so ignorant of the world around you, so lackluster. And then the fact all these people, back in the West are like, oh, Lindsay, you're so nice, you're so good. They're so ungrateful.
Mhm.
From a situation that really Lindsay Lohan made a problem. She could have, if she really wanted to help these people, there are about 1,000 better ways to do it than
Mhm.
shoving a phone in their face and like, oh, hey, I'm charitable. Let me have your kids. Oh, why are you why are you so angry? I'll just grab them off you. Oh, why have I been hit? And then like crying about it. It's like,
Yeah.
now these people are unwittingly media, under media scrutiny in the West, instead of having, they could be having international help from people and stuff,
Yeah.
and positive. Instead, the conversation is, oh, Lindsay Lohan, is she nice? And it's about her rather
Yeah.
than the people who needed the help.
Yeah. She's framed the conversation away from the pain and the very real suffering of these refugees and centered it all on, her petty problems and her, awful activism.
Mm, exactly. Just, it's not even activism because will she do anything for these people beyond like ridiculous charity stunts like this? Is she gonna come back the next day and be like, oh, I'm sorry for what happened, let's put some of my millions into this deprived community? No, she's probably going to go home and forget all about it, and maybe she'll do a little advert for it, but from the comfort of her multi-million-dollar house. And this kind of liberal, lackluster, centrist sort of dotting around the lines without ever crossing them is
Mhm.
why the system is so poor that we see it today. Because it's like there's no substance to anything that's said. It's style, and pretty bad style at that. Because as we've seen,
Mhm. It's so
it,
performative.
exactly, yeah. And it's why social progress has to be hard hitting. It has to say no, the system isn't going to be improved by just dotting it with little smiles and putting ribbons over stuff. You got to actually challenge the social norms. You got to
Mhm.
improve things, and ultimately that's why anti-capitalism is the core of left-wing thought, of progressive thought. It has to be, because if you want to truly progress, you have to challenge the norms holding us back.
Yeah. Like individual charity versus real systematic change.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you can go around handing money to people, and yeah, sure, it would be right if you're Lindsay Lohan and you've got millions in the bank. But for the average, the likes of you and I, we don't have that money.
Mhm.
After a while, fine, we're not homeless, but there's only so much we can give, and
Yeah.
it shouldn't be down to one or two people, but the entire society, the system, to ensure that no one is in the situation where they've got nothing, where they're on the streets. You
Yeah.
know,
No one should have to depend on the kindness of their exploiter.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's insulting to even suggest that, yet somehow it's a selling point of the system. It's like, oh, charity does good work. Well, why does the charity need to exist? Is a society
Mhm.
that poor that we can't provide for everyone with basic human rights? And the answer is no, we could provide, but the chains of the system hold us back.
Yeah.
Um, I find it really I find it incredulous that people could defend the system with, oh, charity does good work, or oh, there's less poverty this year. It's like, well, there's still poverty, and that whole poverty decreasing thing is a bit of a lie anyway. But
It's true. Like poverty, like even like in the UK, wages have actually gone down over the
mm,
last 8 years. It's just incredible. Um, and yet we still hear all this nonsense about how, oh, but so much more money is being given to charity. That makes everything.
yeah,
What it really is, very wealthy, very powerful people wanting to look good, so we keep them around.
mm, exactly. The ruling class sort of trying to give itself a bit of a bluster, giving itself some room to say, like trying to make itself seem all like cool and trendy, like, oh, here at McDonald's we've got a new charity, we're doing our bit for the people. Meanwhile, here's your minimum wage salary. If you complain, you're fired. I'm off to the Caribbean to my private yacht.
Yeah.
um, And on the point of poverty, the way they do the stats as well is so disingenuous. It's like, oh, poverty has gone down as long as it's like income households below or above a certain amount.
About which, like $1.24.
Yeah.
Okay, so now there's a bunch of people at $1.25.
And plus, there's no account for inflation. There's no account for the real life problems. Like $1.25, that's meant to support a household. Like, yeah, fine, maybe a house with no power or bills that, well, they've not paid their healthcare bills or whatever.
Like, what if prices are rising at the same rate that people's incomes are rising, and especially as they are at an even higher rate, then the supposed gains are completely erased and negated.
Yeah, exactly. It's it's a pointless exercise because it really ignores so many of the intricacies and the glaring holes um, in capitalism, and especially ignore the fact that poverty shouldn't even need to exist in the first place because there's clearly enough for everyone. It's just window glossing to try and distract the main problem. The idea that, oh, we don't have to have poverty, but the system itself is causing it. And their answer isn't, oh well, we can eliminate poverty. It's, oh well, we've done our bit to try and lower poverty, ignoring the fact that they haven't, and it's still pretty bad. And even people who aren't technically in poverty, there's still problems. There's still the everlasting threat of being in poverty. It's just because you've got a roof over your head doesn't mean it's going to be there tomorrow unless you continuously engage in this system.
Yeah, I can't even remember. I think it was like something like 75% of Americans can't afford to miss one paycheck.
Exactly. Like most people can't afford that. Imagine losing a month's worth of revenue or income. Where are your bills going to come from? How are you heating your house? In the UK and in Canada, I guess, because you're in the Northern Hemisphere as well. We've got winter coming up. How many people are going to be having a torrid time? How many kids are going to be going to school without having a proper meal? Or how many? Well, if the kids are eating, how many parents are going to work knowing they've had to miss their meal so that their kids can eat? They've not, they've been ill all year and stressed out, and in many cases depressed and stuff because they can't afford medication. They can't afford to keep themselves well. There's no reason for all this to be happening, but we've got to see supposedly people on top making billions. People able to control the entire economy essentially because they've got the money to do so, lifted from the produce of the workers, controlled at the expense of the working class.
Yeah.
And it's just so pointless and doesn't need to happen. We could have a society that addresses so much of our problems. And subsequently, the benefit is that suddenly people are more productive. Suddenly people can actually have the energy to, do things. Suddenly, like all those people who are living from paycheck to paycheck in dead-end, miserable jobs, they can suddenly put their energy into things they actually like doing. Think about how many writers and actors and craftsmen we could have if we didn't have them all chained down to city jobs. Think about how automation is improving our society, and we can actually utilize that for the workers for everyone's benefit rather than just so Jeff Bezos and what's his name, Elon Musk can make an extra billion.
Going back to the Lindsay Lohan thing again, it actually did remind me of Elon Musk. Like, remember when he on Twitter said, oh, I could fix the Flint water supply crisis. I'm going to do that. And then he never did. It was never heard of again. But that tweet got a huge amount of attention and a bunch of positive headlines, gushing headlines about how he was going to do something. But he never did. And what it ended up being was just a pointless photo op. Think of what he did with, the submarine to save the Thai children that were stuck in that cave. He built this bizarre contraption, which ended up being completely useless to the rescue effort. And but he's still expected to be applauded for his for contributing basically nothing. And when one of the actual rescuers, laughed at his silly invention on Twitter, he called him a pedophile.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I saw that. Yeah. Ridiculous. And these are the people who supposedly earned their money and their position at the top of society, like some ridiculous guy who throws a tantrum when he gets criticized, rightfully so, for throwing together bits of junk and claiming it's going to save the day. Like,
No, he completely deserved his to be mocked for that.
Mm.
And not only that, the idea that Elon Musk earned his way in the world. First of all, he came from an extremely wealthy family. Like his great uncle owned an emerald mine.
In
Um,
apartheid South Africa, for
mhm.
sure.
And not only that, Elon Musk's company, Tesla, would have gone bankrupt years ago if it weren't for billions of dollars of government subsidies keeping it afloat. So this is a person who has had, for years and years and years, their whole livelihood guaranteed by the donations of the public and by the inherited wealth of their ancestors. And yet somehow we're supposed to look up to them as some sort of innovator and great entrepreneur and like great man. Oh, he's so wonderful.
Exactly. Like it's just like you say, absurd. Like inherited wealth that had to be. It's not even like imagine what anyone could do with millions to spend, and they still had to be bailed out and helped by a government that should be helping its people, but no, it's having to it's protecting these people because obviously capital is design it's going to serve the wealthy. It's going to naturally be helped by the people.
Yeah.
Not by people, sorry, helped by helped for the wealthy even.
Yeah.
Um,
Elon Musk is a big donor to both the Democrats and the Republicans.
mm,
He
because
likes both sides to continue those subsidies.
yeah, and obviously both in any politics really, capital determines politics, and subsequently when you see someone like Musk able to just pour his fortune into ensuring politics stays the same, it is a perfect example of why capitalism and democracy do not really mesh. You've got a person with colossal power, with I think actually no, Jeff Bezos is more than him, but certainly he's a billionaire. He's got the money to do what he wants, really. And this one individual can dictate over everyone else, essentially, use their money to buy out democracy.
Mm-hmm.
Hence the colossal amount of chances his company has received. Hence the complete lack of consequence, just declaring himself potentially able to save Flint, and then not actually doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
What people should be asking is, oh, all this money exists, and we could use it to fix the fact that many of our citizens don't have clean drinking water, fix
Mm-hmm.
the massive economic uncertainty many of our people live with, fix the decaying infrastructure rife in America. But instead, we use it so that Elon Musk can throw together vanity projects, which he sends off to parts of the world that don't even need it, and then call people pedos on Twitter.
Yeah,
It's
or
absurd.
launch cars into space.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's such a waste of time. That's it's another glaring um, area in which capitalism is just ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. And then another thing that I found like really like about Elon Musk was when he smoked marijuana live on Joe Rogan's stream in a country, America, where it is illegal. And of course, he faces no consequences for it. But the political party that he subsidizes, the Republican Party, pushes for marijuana to be illegal across the country and to deprive states of the right to legislate against, legislate on marijuana's legality, and uses that as an excuse to imprison hundreds of thousands of Black people in America
Mm.
and keep them locked up in oftentimes private prisons where they're paid, $2 an hour to do hard labor.
Yeah, I mean, it just shows the link between capitalism and racism as a force for maintaining social power. Firstly, in the double standard that exists, for a wealthy white person like Musk to be smoking marijuana, um, and chilling out on a podcast where he gets to chum it up with people who are never really going to challenge him.
Yeah.
I haven't watched the podcast. I've seen the meme obviously, but I'm not really. I don't really tend to go out my way to watch such videos.
Yeah. It was
But
a hilarious. It was a hilarious image, though. It was big, like.
uh, well, no, certainly, like it's just him getting to be ridiculous, and then, like you say, thousands, and millions even. I mean, the US has an incarceration population that is bigger than loads of countries, I believe. It's the
highest in the world.
Exactly, easily the highest in the world. And these people who are in there for essentially nothing, half these people wouldn't be there if it, in fact, I reckon like 90 to 95% of people are there simply because of the poverty they exist in. For instance, the lack of money they have, that's down to the economic inequalities of capitalism. The legacy of segregation, keeping their neighborhoods in poverty. The lack of funding the schools and resources get in their areas where they live in and stuff.
And then constant austerity pushed by right-wing
exactly. Exactly. That's not their fault. I mean, yeah, fine. They stole a bit of bread or something, or some nappies to help, protect their family and stuff. That shouldn't be a crime. That shouldn't even have to happen. But then they're thrown in jail probably for life because they can't afford their bail. And like you say, working $2 an hour, doing the work of private companies, and subsequently making a fortune for McDonald's, for Nike, for Walmart, for not Asda. Actually, well, probably Asda. I mean, Asda, I'm pretty sure, are owned by Walmart. All these corporations benefiting from this system, making more money and insulating their power, accruing more capital as per capitalism, all off the subjugation of black people in America, of the working class in America. And like you say, it's clearly weaponized racism. It's clearly bigotry. It's clearly a double standard. Yet it is the weapon and the tool of capitalism. It's how it's always been. From slavery to segregation to what we see today, the war on drugs and stuff. It's always a tool of furthering power, of making sure we can benefit, or the capitalist class can benefit from the subjugation of different identities and different workers. In this case,
that like the white classes can benefit of the subjugation of black people in America.
Yeah, it's why you see all these like these we're going to start a weed business, marijuana, like little quirky items, I can't think of them off the top of my head, but you've seen all those like adverts for like white people doing it, and then how many black people are in private prisons doing the work of others through no choice of their own. Like the wages they get aren't enough to do anything with. They get to buy like a phone call maybe in the prison, but then it's never going to pay their bail. It's never going to pay for a lawyer to help reevaluate their case. So the state can just keep locking them away for longer and longer.
Handing and in private prisons, like they do everything in your power to keep you there because you're a money-making tool for them. It's much cheaper to employ you than an actual worker, which would have the state checking in. Oh, you're not paying these employees properly. Paying them like $2, $1 an hour is much cheaper than paying them the minimum wage in America, which is $7.50 an hour, which, by the way, nowhere in America is that enough to cover people's basic rent.
Yeah, no, it's ridiculous how like abysmal the living wage and the minimum wage, the discrepancies between them are. But like you say, private prisons have the incentive to maintain the incarceration rates, hence the the colossal efforts of the Republicans, and to be fair, the Democrats too, because they're hardly innocent in this either. To maintain things like the war on drugs, things like systemic poverty, things like institutional defundment and austerity, because they maintain the hegemony and the power that the ruling class have. We go back to prisons. Look at how abysmal some of the living quality is there. Look at the complete lack of any health standards in many of these prisons. Look at just all the things. Sorry, is that my notification?
What notification?
Maybe I just heard it. Loads of different loads of different problems just in government, not in government, sorry, in the system that are caused by capitalism. Ultimately, these parties, the Democrats, Republicans, and even the little ones, to be fair, they all serve capital. They all have the intention of accumulating more profits, more money. Subsequently, corporations are always going to use them, or people with just capital, they're always going to use them as a vessel for their own interest, for their own money. And subsequently, unless you have systemic reform, unless you have power to the workers, to the masses, to say no, this is wrong, we shouldn't have these people locked away to do the work of other people, we're not going to see that progress. Because why would someone willingly cede their power? Why would a corporation say, oh well, we make millions off this private prison we have, but we're just going to let them all go because it's actually quite wrong? It's like, no, they knew from the start what they were doing was wrong. And if they didn't have the opportunity, if they didn't have the class and the power to reign over people, but you wouldn't see, slavery where black people were being classified as less than human. You wouldn't see segregation designed to maintain the power after slavery. You wouldn't see the Reagan era defunding of these of like already underfunded schools and libraries and stuff. Hence the fact that unemployment, poverty, and there's another one. Incarceration rates have stayed the same since segregation in America. You'd think like 50 years on, there's been change, but no, in a lot of areas it really hasn't. And yeah, sure, on paper, the black American citizen can do the same as the white American citizen, but in reality, loads of them are felons, they don't have voting rights. Loads of them live in poverty, but loads of them live in areas that they're never going to leave, essentially, because they're just going to be trapped there. And this is true also of the working class, the working American. In years, what have they got to show for the American dream? For many of them, it's still the same as it was back in the Great Depression days when, their jobs are in uncertain terms. Look at how automation is desecrating working cities like, Chicago, Detroit, the famous one, obviously, Baltimore, all these, these cities where industry is decaying. The workers of the city, the masses, they're living in fear of poverty or in poverty or even homeless, turning to crime, being funneled into the prison system. Meanwhile, Bob the landlord, Jim the factory owner, Steve the CEO, they're fine. They have benefited of everyone else's labor for decades, and now their families get a nice, get to play around with stocks all day. They get to trade, on those horrible stock trading apps.
And not only that, like they can afford to buy out politicians for this to continue and get even worse. Like since like the 1970s, all the the strength of unions, the protections that working people have, have been on a pretty steady decline because of neoliberalism, because of targeted policies to promote the interests of a small group of people above everyone else.
Exactly. And unions, they're obviously not perfect, but they do a massive amount for workers' rights, as do all worker movements. The core of fighting for progress comes from people willing to stand up and make things happen. And it's no coincidence that FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, one of America's best ever presidents, was very heavily coerced, and probably not coerced, but like forced and dominated by far left movements. The push for social reform to be radical, or radical at least in American context. The fact it's still the backbone of many American working rights today should probably tell you, firstly, how important it was, but secondly, how little progress there has been since. Like you say, unions have lost their rights, not just in the US, but in all across the capitalist West, because as it turns out, capitalism, when left to exist, is going to decay. The rights and well-being of workers will be increasingly sidelined, so that profit and power and class can be maintained. Fascism is capitalism in decay, as the saying goes, and it's never been truer, because as capital becomes harder to consolidate, as profits become harder to accrue, the wealthy, wanting to maintain their power, turn to more draconian means, like, for instance, no, I know, like, for instance, gutting union rights, like making the right to strike, a crime, like giving your employer the power to fire you without any due process, like making horrible prisons where people have to give birth in their cells with no medical care medical care even.
You know,
Meanwhile,
like targeting ethnic minorities.
yeah, bring it
Like,
back to what you said, like persecuting people for smoking a drug. Like, it's ridiculous,
and
but it's ridiculous for a reason,
yeah,
because it
because it's
serves capital. You were going to say something.
Yeah, so I wanted to bring a conversation back around to what you were saying about how Nike uses prison labor. And I find this pretty interesting because not too long ago, it was revealed that Nike had been donating millions and millions of dollars to the Republican Party. Meanwhile, supposedly they were having, a controversy with conservatives over appointing Colin Kaepernick to be, the new face of their ad campaign. Even Donald Trump threw in a tweet. But meanwhile, the whole time they were bankrolling the Republican Party as their stock soared from a bunch of liberal people purchasing Nike clothing and Nike merchandise.
Well, it's about gaming the system as well.
Mm-hmm.
Nike, they've got talented PR people and marketing people who know how to game the system. So on the one hand, they can appear to unknowing liberals. I mean, you can talk for days about how liberals, a lot of them try and say they mean well, but really their actions amount to nothing. Um, they go and support them. They go and say, oh, I'm going to buy Nike stuff now, with a little arm thing there, and subsequently end up backing the people who ultimately address. They want to get more money, so they're going to support parties which relax economic constraints. Scrap workers' rights, make it easier for them to accumulate more money, and this obviously, making Kaepernick the face of Nike, on the one hand, conservatives are like, oh, they disrespect the flag, but they don't care ultimately, because I mean, sure, there's like a few people who are like, oh, Nike are bad now, I'm going to burn my shoes. The not very aware people, the people who are the reactionaries on Twitter and stuff, but Jim, Stephen, who owns the hedge trust fund, hedge bank. I can't even speak.
Trust fund.
Trust fund. There we go. Yeah, Stephen, who owns that, he doesn't care. He's not. I doubt he even owns Nike to begin with. But he thinks, oh, now's a good time to invest in Nike. Suddenly, their stocks are going to go up, and we're going to make a killing. They don't care that the bog standard conservative is gonna dislike Nike, because they are one or two people. They're not ultimately going to affect things. What's going to affect things is winning the support and the distraction of the liberal elements in media. So, for instance, the things like CNN, which aren't going to do, they're not going to do the investigative journalism that's required, of what should be required of a news outlet. They're not going to say, oh, Nike, you're doing abysmal working treatments in the third world. You're not doing anything to help the local economy, and you're just pocketing this money for yourself. They're going to say, oh, wow, Nike, you put a black person on the face of your covers. Ignore the fact that, what they've had Serena Williams, pretty sure, was it Usain? It might have been Usain Bolt they had. I can't remember. It was definitely Michael Johnson. Loads of footballers like a name for you. Ronaldo, Rooney, Neymar, like players who are worth millions in marketing. You probably make millions every year. They've had all these inspirational figures throughout their history. They've always done that sort of thing. They don't care about actual progress. They just want to slap a face on their progress and make a killing elsewhere, make more money elsewhere. And subsequently, when Nike had this position of, oh, we're doing the right thing, it's not a real one. If they wanted to actually do things, as we've both said, they could very easily address the plethora of workers' rights abuse and human rights abuse, to be honest, cases in their company, but they don't. They want to make more money. So on the one hand, they play the unaware liberal who's going to give them good praise, and like but like you said, buy their shoes, write fluff pieces about them in liberal media, or just the general sort of media in general. I don't think I wouldn't call most media liberal per se, but at the same time, it's got writers who lean more liberal. Um, get all the fluff pieces, but meanwhile, donate to the Republicans because they're gonna be the ones giving them the economic breaks. And then the next election they'll say to the Democrats, "Oh well, if you want our money, which we have a lot of, by the way, you're gonna relax some economical things as well." And the Democrats obviously have, because there's a reason Hillary Clinton, for instance, is I think an honorary member of the board of Walmart. I think, so she's supposedly one of the one of the good ones, but here she is friends with like half the corporation executives. These people don't care about social progress; they care about capital, and subsequently,
social progress, if it benefits capital, will be advanced and put on display. Social progress, if it harms capital, will be held back and shuffled to the side.
Exactly, and it's not even the benefit social progress; it's the veneer of social progress.
Yeah,
it's the
it seems like, oh, look how progressive I am. I say I support Black Lives Matter, but here I am, what am I doing to combat gentrification? I've moved into this nice, this neighborhood that used to be for Black people, well, I shouldn't say for Black people, but like, you know what I'm getting at? There were neighborhoods in the United States which, due to segregation, have become majority African American or inhabited majority by people of color. And then these, wealthy white people move in and the prices rise too high for people to stay there. And so they have to leave, like gentrification.
Mm.
And if you're contributing to gentrification, like I saw this really excellent tweet that said, neoliberalism is when people move into a Black area and they replace all the Black people with Black Lives Matter signs.
Well, exactly. Like the Black Lives Matter slogan is meant to say, we'll look at the fact that despite the supposed equality we have, in reality we've got a lot of massive racial problems, illustrated a lot of the time through different forms like class, through sex, through sexuality. There's more to it than just can Black people vote. And subsequently, liberals, or the supposed the caring social progress types, plastering a load of Black Lives Matter signs over a neighborhood, while driving up rent prices, while costing people their livelihoods, is actually doing more harm than good. And then take someone like Hillary Clinton, who she and her husband, Bill Clinton, their war on drugs policies, their benefit reform, their actions in the third world, in countries like Honduras, they ruined the lives of people of color. They massively benefited the hegemonic system.
They passed that 1994 crime bill, which largely expanded the penalties that people could face for drug possession, and as well as a host of other crimes. And there was all that racial dog whistling about how there was all these super predators in Black communities.
Exactly, and it has the stench of the usual. Black people are less able to detect bad things. They're more easily coerced. And the idea is that Black people, you need a helping hand from the Democrats, from us, the good guys. When in reality, it's these quote unquote good guys who are the ones demeaning and patronizing people of color. Subsequent, like you see all the insulting, the expectancy of Democrats, like of some Democrats. You're going to vote for us because we know what's best for you, and you don't like the Republicans, so you're going to vote for us. When it's like, actually, there's no real incentive because you have done so little to help, the community, help the community, help our areas. You've done nothing to help our situation, and you're then going to waltz into our neighborhood. You're not even going to do that. In fact, you're not you're going to look at, you're going to, put out a few posters, maybe, if that, and expect us to vote for you, and then blame us if we don't win. And it's like,
Yeah.
that's so, they wonder why people have no faith in them when they treat half the populace as, oh, you must vote for us.
Mhm.
It's like,
Yeah.
no, people recognize that the Democrats are a dreadful party in many respects. I mean, yeah, sure, we're better than the Republicans. They don't
That's
have,
saying nothing.
I mean, to be fair, they don't have Nazis running for them. I'll
Yeah.
give them that, but it's a very low bar, and it's it's not enough really. It's in many ways the neoliberal enabling the continuation of capitalism.
Mhm.
Um, sounds is pretty bad. The liberals, they could, if they had listened to left-wing critiques of the system, if they had actually made any substantial effort, they could have ignored they're sort of not ignored. They could have stopped much of what is happening now. Imagine if we'd taken actual efforts to curb global warming back in the 80s. Instead, we're left with a planet that is well on the way to a mass ecological disaster. Um, and there's not a lot we can do about it. I actually saw today the Trump administration is well aware of the massive disaster on the way, but thinks it's too late to do anything, so they don't care, and they're gonna
Right?
exactly, and then they're gonna eventually the wealthy will be fine because they'll have their nice houses off in safe areas. Meanwhile, the rest of us are going to be left in a dying, hollowed out planet.
Mhm.
Um, and what we're going to
Yeah.
do about it?
They'll build paradise off of the money they stole from the rest of us.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like with automation, while we are still responsible for their wealth, we need to be seizing the means. If we get
Mhm.
to a point where, they can use automated means to produce their lives, they are not, they don't care what happens to the rest of us. They're going to, draw up their walls and let us rot, essentially. And it's scary, but it's true. What reason are the wealthy going to have to keep us around when they don't need us?
Mhm.
And I think, you know, going back to the Democrats for a second, there are elements within the party, there are fringes that want change.
Yeah.
It's not the main, the upper echelons of the party itself. The Clintons, the Pelosi's, all of them, scrap them. They're rubbish. They're not who I'm talking
Tom
about.
Perez.
Sorry.
Tom Perez.
Yeah, exactly. All of them, dreadful. But there are people who recognise that the Democrats are, um, they're in the big two. They're the only party that's gonna electorally, at least, beat the Republicans. There's no other chance for anyone else. Just even if you had the support, just the system itself is so badly organized that it's going to be one of those two. There's people within that party who recognise there needs to be substantial change, and it's true. They're not on the set. They're not as left wing as me or you. They're not people
Mhm.
who are going to be like, oh, capitalism has to go. But they
Yeah.
want real
Social
change.
Democrats.
Yeah, exactly. Social Democrats, and yeah, we can say we like, yeah, they're not good because then in many ways they aren't, but at the same time they are probably better than most, certainly in American context, and it's important that people still back them in a way. They still, recognize that that's better than a lot of things.
Yeah,
Um,
while you can, presenting more radical ideas.
Exactly. So, like saying, oh, to the SOCDEM, saying, yeah, you could go further. This is still capitalism. This is still flawed, etc., etc. But then also saying, well, this is still better than anything we've had in the last 50 years. You take the SOCDEM over another Hillary Clinton or one of her friends any day of the week. But obviously, at the same time, that also comes with the caveat that it's not enough, and it's really not good enough to make real change.
Yeah, and this is why I think there needs to be like a dual power strategy. Like on one hand, we should support social democratic candidates where we must and further left candidates where we can, while also working on organizing, building up grassroots movements, taking back control of industries and workplaces where we can, putting out a presence on the street to hold power to account. All these things have to happen as well. It has to happen, at both of the places. It has to happen. Change can be, I think it should be, from both within and from outside of the system.
Exactly. You can want to change the system whilst working within the system to make things better. It's like in the UK with Corbyn. No one's saying that Corbyn's Corbyn's not gonna be like, oh, it's time to get rid of capitalism. He said the other day he wanted to get rid of for greed capitalism, which is a bit like you're saying. Capitalism is greed, pretty much. So you may as well be saying the same thing. But at the same time, you can support someone like that. He's the best politician we've had in decades. Certainly, when you compare to the Blair era of Labour, best we've had in ages. Whilst also saying that the system is bad. It's pragmatism. It's logic. It's thinking logically and saying, well, you got to do X. Whilst also doing Y. So why not do both?
No, definitely, and. No, I definitely agree. But I want to bring back the conversation to Nike because I found this interesting word from Peter Coffin, actually, that he used an analysis of something else that I think could describe what Nike is doing. Peter Coffin tweets, "Recuperation is the process by which politically radical ideas and images are twisted, co-opted, absorbed, diffused, incorporated, annexed, and commodified within media culture and bourgeois society, thus becoming innocuous or even profitable." That's entirely what's happening with Colin Kaepernick's image and the idea, the push of the Black Lives Matter movement to create to make Black Lives Matter in American society. That radical idea is instead watered down to a hashtag. It's watered down to a catchphrase. And it's made profitable. It's made Nike stock go way up, and it's drawn a lot of attention to the company, even as they continue to support the policies that the movement was initially criticizing.
Exactly. Firstly, Peter Coffin is a really excellent person, and I really hope that everyone who's watching me, if there is anyone watching me, goes and watches them, because you can watch a load. You can learn loads from them. But like he said, like they've said, like you said, look at the way has benefited in many different facets from it. Yeah, sure, the babyish conservatives on Twitter and stuff burning their shoes, a minute group, really. I doubt there's fine, one tweet got loads of likes, but it's more for the spectacle. It's like, oh, yeah, we love our flag burners. We hate our flag burners. Even that's the same as supporting this guy. It's nonsense, and it's more of a statement, really, than anything. But Nike don't care about them. They care about the people who are going to go out and buy their shoes. They're going to care about the good publicity, and they've not only done that, but they've also taken the sting out of the progress, because instead of making it a massive a movement to say, no, let's question racism, let's question people getting shot, let's question the prison system, in mass incarceration, systemic poverty, the racial element of capitalism that enables Black people to be commodified and treated like a commodity for wealthy white people. And it throws all that out the window and turns it into, oh, Nike have just put one Black person in front of their shoes and their advertisement. That means they want to end racism, and they're going to end racism.
And to support the ending of racism, buy Nike products.
Exactly. It's like, if you buy Nike, you support anti-racism. If you buy Adidas, then you are racist. You may as well be in the Klan. It's ridiculous. Meanwhile, Nike are benefiting from awful, shocking, just kind of labor laws that are just bereft of any fairness in the third world. Sweatshops making a massive fortune. And subsequently, no one's focusing on this as much, or people are. Left-wing people are, but liberal media, your CNNs, your ABCs, all your lovely little liberal writers and stuff, they are giving good press. They're focusing on these ridiculous tantrum, toddler conservatives burning their shoes. They're focusing on nonsense and guff, while people are dying in the third world because Nike like to make a profit, as per capitalism, as per maximizing your profit. And they're playing both ends, and you're not going to hear about Nike doing that as much because they've put a black person in front of their thing. It's like, and granted, Kaepernick, it's good what he's doing. He's raised a lot of money for charity, and he's a good voice. But at the same time, it should be asking better questions than, oh, is this one guy going to help save the day? We should be asking, oh, well, instead of having just one company doing this, let's ask why it's taking this to do it in the first place. Let's ask why this exists in the first place. Let's ask for deeper cutting questions than just, will buying Nike shoes end racism? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, definitely. And lastly, I wanted to go into why people seem so reluctant and worried about the word fascism. Like, I don't think you should use fascism to describe all conservatism and all right-leaning tendencies. But I think that, say, for instance, I put out this tweet about the situation in Italy, where, this prime minister is saying basically that we don't want immigrants because we don't want any more slaves. He's not prime minister, he's minister of immigration. He's saying that he wants a registry for all the Roma people in Italy so they can be, cataloged and deported. And I said, Italy has fallen to fascism. And then I had to deal with all this nonsense about how this system where, how it isn't fascism, basically, from this one person who refused to admit that, that categorizing someone, registering people by their race and then deporting them is a fascist tactic that we observed in Mussolini's Italy, that we observed in Nazi Germany before the war. That this is a well-known fascist tactic. And they seem to be dense and continually say over and over and over again, no, it's not fascism. No, it's just fine. Like it really frustrated me. And it seemed to me that, like, how can we get people to stand up against something if they don't even see it as wrong? Why is this idea so normal? How can this idea be normal to anyone?
It's some very interesting points you've raised there. Firstly, it's easy for people to portray, left-wing people such as you or I, saying, "Oh, look, fascism is a real issue; it's on the rise," you're being too dramatic and stuff. Because for many people, fascism is, very strictly Nazi Germany. They don't see it unless it's the swastika everywhere. They don't see it unless it's literally people being marched off and killed in concentration camps. And to a degree, the people that are saying this are not too far from the truth, because people are being marched off to camps. People are having their rights taken away. People are seeing the overbearing presence of nationalist symbols everywhere. Just look at what happens when you disrespect the flag in America. People care more about that flag than they do the people living in the country.
There was this huge news story, this huge kerfuffle of, oh no, the hurricane broke the flag. Meanwhile, there was far less media attention for this prison, which was completely abandoned, and all the inmates left to the hurricane.
Well, exactly. Like, it just says everything of American society, but that one of like a bit of fabric gets destroyed. But fascism is capitalism indicated. It's not really a set state of being, but a gradual process in many a way, because it doesn't really. It's not like once you reach point X, that is fascism. It's a gradual decay of a system designed to commodify and to exploit the worker, the industry, create profit, not create profit, sorry, extract profit by stealing the value of labor and stuff. And then fascism ramps this up by introducing more facets to it. Like you said, using people of marginalized identities, people of color, immigrants, foreigners, not foreigners, I'm not actually no, yeah, immigrants, foreigners, different sexualities, gender, disabilities, all those different elements of society. Um, oh, gosh, and turns them into ways to maintain social power. Look at the Nazis, for instance. They used all these different identities as said they were Untermensch. They said they were lesser, and not only did this give the people, the Aryan race and stuff, all that nonsense, white people, more power, but it also gave the Nazis a massive pool of free labor. The concentration camps delivered a massive amount of goods and resources for cheap for the Nazis, because once some of them died, just shipped a load more in, especially with the Nazis taking over parts of Europe, because suddenly you've got now Belgian Untermensch and French Untermensch and stuff. All these people you can now have working for you for next to nothing. In fact, probably nothing, because they died because of how abysmal the conditions were in the ghettos and stuff. And ones that didn't die are obviously getting gassed in the Holocaust. That erasure is happening, but it's about that control. It's about maximizing profit and stuff. You look at how corporations benefited under Nazi Germany and under Mussolini's Italy, and that's down to fascism. That's down to limits being abandoned. Suddenly, you've got no striking rights. All unions got rid of. The one union is just the glorified Nazi, worship party, basically. Like, no striking rights. You can't show any signs of disobedience. It's a way of keeping people in line so that capital is easier to accrue and so that power maintains and stays in the hands of the wealthy. To a similar degree, America can be seen as also somewhat fascist. Now, people hear this and they think, "Oh, well, we're not like Nazi Germany. I don't worship the Führer. I'm not a Nazi." But at the same time, look at what's happening in the country. Workers' rights are being desecrated. They're being removed. Striking rights in many states is already pitiful, but is already being eroded. LGBTQ rights. Look at how this administration is treating trans people, slowly removing them from various facets of society. We've already seen the military, but that was sort of like a testing ground for Trump. We're already seeing healthcare rights for trans people and LGBTQ people being removed. We're seeing the Supreme Court back bigots who want to stop gay people using their services. That's disgraceful, but that's fascism. And just like how Nazis didn't go from just Jews were okay to the Jewish people were suddenly in prisons and stuff, their rights were eroded over time, just as all of their rights were. We're seeing black people, people of color being arrested more. Police brutality going up, police violence going up. Trump encouraging the police to be violent. Prison incarceration, that's not going to be questioned. We're seeing a sheriff who tortured prisoners and stuff and was generally a piece of garbage.
20% of the vote and won a county in the Arizona Republican primary.
Exactly. That put people like that able to gain more power in America. All these things, taxation going down to make corporations more money, essentially, to accumulate capital more. All these different elements of society designed to maintain power, to oppress marginalized people, be it workers, what's it called, people of color, women, LGBTQ people, disabled people. That's another one. Look at how disabled people are losing what little rights they had because the the ruling class don't care. Trump.
They're removing their protections from disabilities.
Exactly. All these different elements are designed with the intent of insulating capital to to make people wealthier as per capitalism, and subsequently we have to describe this process as fascist, because it is, because people are going to die from this process and the people in charge do not care because it's going to make them more money. And yeah, sure, it's not exactly the same as Nazi Germany, but to expect it to be would be foolish, because fascists learn. They recognize that Hitler lost in the end. He didn't maintain his power, and these people want to.
What they're doing is they're boiling the frog to that point. They recognize that if the day Trump took office, he instituted martial law. He wouldn't last very long. His popular support would collapse. But they know that if they can change the political climate, bit by bit by bit by bit, slowly turning up the heat on the frog, it won't jump out of the pan, the boiling water, and it will stay there, and it will get roasted alive.
Exactly, and it's subsequently why you have right-wing people who they aren't fascists. They don't see themselves as fascists. They don't see themselves as bigoted and stuff, but they support inadvertently even these processes with their ignorance. You see people who like, oh, I believe that all people are equal, but then they have no problem with working rights being scrapped because it's like, oh well, you should be striking, you should be working, you shouldn't be disrupting the day, and suddenly you get workers having no striking rights in many areas of the country. You see people say, oh well, I don't want people to be poor, but on benefits they've just got no incentive to do better, and then all of a sudden you've got more homelessness and you've got more people living in abject poverty because they've got no way of providing for themselves because they're either ill or they're disabled, or their pay has not gone up in years because their employer has no obligation to do so, and that's happening. People who say, oh well, feminism's gone too far. We've got women's rights already, and all of a sudden abortion rights are under threat because a scumbag is about to be appointed to the Supreme Court, or discrimination laws in the workplace are being scrapped because suddenly it makes the situation easier for those in charge. The whole system operates on the most part, or on a large part, through people's ignorance, through people's willingness to accept these things. And it comes down to the right-wing model, the right-wing mindset being inherently prone to infection and decay. Fascism, it's gonna infect capitalism in every situation because at core the two hold the same principles of commodification, of maximizing profit, of exploiting your fellow human or your fellow being, anything, as your commodity, as your source of power. And it doesn't matter that one right-wing person isn't a Nazi, isn't gonna turn and enslave their fellow person for being black or whatever, because ultimately one capitalist will. The person running Nike maybe isn't gonna personally beat down a worker or imprison a black person, but they still benefit from that process, and there are people willing to cross that line. And it's why the system is inherently tied to these right-wing ideas, because ultimately they're just the right-wing ideas carried out to a more efficient, more less human way. The Nazis of yesteryear, they weren't cartoonish villains. They weren't just some Captain Planet villain called like Sludge McBad or something. They were human beings with families who cared and loved one another, but who wanted to make capitalism more efficient for them. Henry Ford, he had a family. He was happy to invest money into Nazi Germany. He made a fortune from it. Many German companies today made their fortunes. Exactly, yeah, Volkswagen, Calvin Klein, I think as well. They made fortunes from Nazi Germany, which still exists today. And they're not run by like lizard people and stuff. They're run by human beings, but human beings infected by the capitalist system and willing to do atrocious things to humans.
But because they don't necessarily see them as human, they don't necessarily see their workers as people, especially if their workers, are people of color, or if they're a marginalized group, because it's easy to dehumanize them. It's easy to ignore their humanity because you can say, oh, they don't look like me. They don't have the same immigration status as me.
Yeah.
They don't have the same sexuality as me. Why should I care about them? Tribalism is a very useful mentality for capitalism because it allows society to be divided up into all these tiny little groups and more effectively controlled by the powers that be.
Exactly. It's why slavery, for instance, obviously slavery has existed for many years, much longer than the transatlantic slave trade. However, the categorization of people into different races, you are black, therefore you are less human. You are darker, so you are even less human. Ooh, you are in Africa, therefore you are subhuman. All these areas of society can be divided up so that the wealthy can benefit from them. Suddenly, you can justify enslaving, black people because they're not human; they're just like cattle or livestock or whatever. Um, and boom! Now you've got the transatlantic slave trade. Now you can make a fortune. Now you have the British Empire as the wealthiest in the world. Oh look! All of a sudden, a few hundred years down the line, that wealth hasn't gone anywhere, and the West is much wealthier than the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Look at America. Oh, we've got our territories and stuff. We can intervene in any country in the world if we like. And boom, we're in the wealthiest. We're the wealthiest country in the world now. No one can challenge us at all because we're that wealthy. We've actively ruined every country basically that doesn't tow to our
Just follow the party line.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Like if you don't agree to our economic conditions, we'll say, oh, you're undemocratic. Let's go and invade. Let's go and install our leader, our guy. He's going to help us. So you either submit or die.
Yeah.
Was there any other area you wanted to cover, by the way, or shall we move on to questions?
Well, another thing, like I thought that something that made it easier for this guy in particular to ignore the march of fascism in Italy was that he was targeting the undocumented as well. Like he justified what he was doing, registering an entire nationality and deporting by saying that oh well, they're undocumented. That makes it okay. It makes it okay to remove people who've lived here for generations and throw them outside, cast them out into the world without any citizenship, without any protection, without any, completely bereft from somewhere where they've grown up their entire life. It's okay because they're undocumented.
It's it's the disgusting mentality to have. It's one that's forged of the need for order, the clinging to laws and order, and the idea that this group have authority, therefore they are right. And it's again born of the classism that capitalism thrives on. The idea that these people are in charge because they deserve to be in charge, because they have worked there, because they have the right to say this. And just like how the wealthiest people in society do not have the rights or should not have the right to govern everyone else. We shouldn't just say, "Oh, you aren't legal because of these documents, therefore you have to go. You deserve to be dehumanized by this fascist regime."
Or even like locked up and
exactly.
treated abysmally, like in the United States. You have your children torn from you, thrown to the ground, living in these nasty cells where the floor is cement and cold, being threatened by sexual abuse by the agents. And sometimes, and this is the strange thing, ICE has begun targeting, not undocumented people as well, just racially profiling any old person on the street, they look like they could be undocumented, and imprisoning them anyway. And because people for so long have justified it by saying, oh, they're undocumented, ICE now has the power to target the documented as well.
Exactly. Because it was never really about, obviously it is about laws, but they don't really care. It's just, as for everything, the testing ground. They don't care that it's in US laws that people should be, have the freedoms and rights to vote and stuff, because they'll create caveats for them to get away with it. Hence every person is should be free from slavery unless they're serving penal labor. Oh look, now you got 4 million people in incarceration. Have fun making your profit, Walmart. It's the same thing. They only allow themselves to. They go so far, see how the public reacts, and go a bit further. Like you said, building up and up and up until you get to a much worse situation. And now they've had their they targeted undocumented immigrants. And obviously people left-wing people like you and I, we're disgraced by it. We we really don't like it. But you get liberals and stuff saying, oh well, we're fine with documented immigrants. They'll show sympathy, but they're still happy to maintain the border.
Reform ICE.
What?
Hashtag reform ICE.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, it's just nonsense that ignores the things that ignore the root of the problem, window dressing. And then you get conservatives who openly support it, right-wing people who openly support it, people who not only just support it but actively try and dox immigrants to try and get them deported, people who make fun of black people and stuff, saying, oh, you'll be next. And then the government thinks, oh well, we can go a bit further now, let's go a bit more. And ICE, obviously, it's not just this administration. ICE existed, Bush and Obama. It's just, it gets ramped up because that's what fascism is. It's a cancer which eats away at capitalism. It's a disease which is going to grow and grow and grow until the root of the problem is discovered, is addressed, and that is capitalism.
Mm-hmm. Because it's pretty easy to move to the dehumanization of social groups when you've already dehumanized entire millions of classes of people by treating tools and exploitable and expendable objects.
Exactly. And that is at core what capitalism is. You're viewing people as mere commodities to be exploited. You're seeing a worker as a transaction, a period of time to be used. And subsequently, you could have the moral and logical question of, oh well, I've got this fortune, but I've got these thousands of workers in a factory doing the jobs that make this fortune possible. I've got all this wealth created by other people. Maybe I should share it. But then oh well, actually I get a nice house and a super yacht and stuff out of it, so why should I do anything? And that leads to further tools of commodification, like you say, like, oh well, these black people, if I can split them up from the white people, I can pay them even less. These disabled people, they're a bit of a nuisance. If I don't have to pay I don't have to recognize their disabilities, I can just pay them less too. Oh well, if I take away these people's voting rights, then they won't be able to vote against me and my heinous schemes. If I categorize women as the lesser gender, then I can pay them even less. If I can suppress LGBTQ rights and enforce cis heteronormativity on people, then I don't even have to cater for their existence. All these different tools, used to eliminate people, to remove their humanity, to ultimately insulate their power, accumulate more capital. They root from a system designed around exploitation, and that is at core capitalism, like you said, like we said even.
Yeah, it's just I wish people could be more compassionate towards the undocumented. Like, it seems to be it's just so bizarre to me. It's just this barrier that people have erected.
It's one born of the society they live in. When you live in a capitalist society, when you're told, oh, you're in it for yourself, it's a dog eat dog world, and so much effort is put into the idea that this is how society is. You look at all people who say, oh, it's human nature for capitalism to exist, it's just a natural process of humanity. Complete nonsense, obviously, but it's ingrained into a lot of people, so they think the way they do because they're told to think the way they do, which sounds a bit generic, like, oh yeah, I'm a free thinker, guys. Like, I don't know how to sound like that, but
that's at the same thing. The funny thing is that the people who think of themselves as free thinkers are often the most compliant towards everything society tells us.
Yeah, either that or they're funded by billionaires and they get a lot of money out of it. But people are conditioned into being selfish a lot of the time. People aren't inherently just horrible, like standoffish people. Think about your family. People don't need to be paid to care for their family a lot of the time. And ultimately that shows people are nice. A lot of people are horrible, but lots of people are also nice. People don't just do things for money. People have to do that because of the system they live in, where if you're not looking out for number one, then you're going to be, unless you're very lucky, you are going to come unstuck. People, obviously, no one looks at a homeless person, for instance, and thinks, oh, I want them to suffer. But people don't have the money to just pay for someone else's living, especially when those people already have families and lives they need to be caring for. Hence, people walk past homeless people because they've not got the money. I try and have like 10p's and stuff, and 5p's in my pocket to give to homeless people, but you can't physically stop and give money to every single homeless person.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, it's easy for people to just walk on by. And
that becomes a habit, right? As you look by them less and less, they gradually start to fade out of view.
Exactly. But obviously, when this comes to laws and stuff, because we lots of people are law-abiding people, or they try and be law-abiding people. When someone who breaks the law comes into view, they're classified as bad. You're meant to associate them on the same level as a murderer or an assaulter or something, and subsequently because of that negative connotation, because of that they're literally grouped into confinement to incarceration with the same people. So like an illegal immigrant is put in the same place as a serial killer or something. We're encouraged to see them like that as criminals. They're literally given uniforms of drab colors, told to work, treated like the failures of society. When in most cases, they're people who lost the birth lottery, born into poverty, trapped in a cycle of police brutality and systemic poverty.
Yeah. And in some countries, even if you're born in the country, you aren't immediately granted citizenship. So through no fault of your own, you can have an uncertain undocumentation status. And sometimes you're just, you're a refugee trying to flee from a conflict that you aren't given recognition. And so you're forced to get into the country through a different way,
Exactly.
through extra legal means.
And people who adhere to these laws, like, it's ridiculous. You've got to ask, why does this law exist? Is there justification for it? So, the law of do not kill other people, or do not abuse people. That has justification. That has morals we can apply. A law that says don't cross this border, which is an imaginary line. That's nonsense. Why does that exist? But to protect the capital of those who are within the border, to kettle people into false identities and nationalities.
Method of control.
Exactly. Another form of tribalism. Hence, so many Americans call other human beings aliens, which is such a horrific thing to call your fellow human, but one they happily do, which is even, in political discourse, a human being who doesn't. Discourse. Exactly, an alien. It's gross, but it's normal for many. Or illegals, whatever. Just horrible language.
And sometimes I think that the language is useful. I think that the language of calling people aliens, like physically almost representing them as not even human, like a different species, is beneficial because it allows you to look at them as less human.
Exactly. Hence the Nazis Untermensch, less than man, under man.
Yeah.
Well, I say that actually, it might not be. My German's a bit rusty, but
right now.
What? Certainly, like, it's term rooted in dehumanization. Comparing the Jewish people to rats, to the plague, comparing black people to monkeys.
Oh, you were right. It's underman, subhuman.
Yeah, brilliant. GCSE German has not left me yet. But no, in the same way that the old, the Jim Crow stereotypes of black people, making them out to be less, apish and like gorillas and stuff, less than human. Like, like the Birth of a Nation, one of the, most famous pieces of propaganda designed to view black people as rapists and people who would be a threat to your women and children and stuff.
Yeah.
Obviously nonsense, but one of the most effective pieces of propaganda of all time, because it helped cement the perception of a need for segregation, of the need to keep black people out of, any conception of humanity. And it took decades for even, part of that legacy to be removed. And you could even, you can argue today that it really, much of it hasn't. I mean, you only have to look at that Serena Williams cartoon, which got made, the one with the obvious, like, animalization.
It did look like a Jim Crow style character.
Exactly. But then people are like, oh, well, I don't see a resemblance. And they don't see how it's racist, even though it's staring them right in the face, because they've been conditioned to see like that.
And that other part where whether they're like, how do you draw Serena Williams without making her look?
Yeah, by Rod Liddell, who's just a bogwash cartoonist. It's nonsense. People obviously know it's not hard to draw a black person without making them look horrible.
Mm-hmm.
And people who say, oh well, if you can't, Serena Williams had an angry moment, but lots of tennis players, quite famously, get angry when they play tennis. There's loads of players who break their rackets and who shout at the umpire. In fact, in most sports, lots of players have a go at fit people when they're not winning, but you don't see the same stereotypes for other players.
Mm-hmm. None of this talk of meltdown.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's strange. We've heard that word as well before.
Oh yeah, it's true, isn't it? Yeah. The Aaron McDonald meltdown. That piece of that gem in our online history.
I don't like as much of what there was all that talk about a meltdown. I don't actually remember you ever screaming about it.
No, I know. And funnily enough, in many of his videos, and many of the Person in Question's videos, he can be seen screaming and yelling. But funnily enough, it's never talked about as his meltdown. Making a 10-minute video yelling about how much you don't like someone for calling out blatant racism. But no, it's very true. But lots of privileged white people, they view any real expression of dissent or emotion from marginalized people, be them LGBTQ or black or women, any marginalized group, they see it as negative. A black person angry that someone touches their hair, that's an invasion of bodily space. That's clearly, why are you touching someone else like that? Would you like it if you were touched?
Petting zoo.
Exactly. That is very blatantly, that's racist. That's based on the idea that black people are, like you said, animals to be petted in a zoo. In fact, in the 70s, literally actually no, not in the 70s, the 50s, but very in recent history, really, in Belgium, black people were still being viewed like that. Gosh, excuse me. Black people exist as viewing spectacles for these people. Hence the need to just pat their hair. Happens quite a lot to me in school, actually. People just sort of often saw me as some sort of mystical person, and subsequently felt the need to just touch my hair, or asking stuff. And ultimately, when people get angry at that, a lot of people react negatively. It's the same thing with Serena Williams. It's the same thing with the racism incident that happened to me on numerous occasions, you'll note. And ultimately, it comes down to the way our society is conditioned a lot of the time, the way we all see things from different perspectives. And as people who belong to marginalized groups, different ones, obviously, but still ones that are the same.
Yeah. I there was I remember very specifically this this cartoon from the Jim Crow era of Martin Luther King saying time for another peaceful protest, and there's a sound, and behind him a whole town is like devastated and in flames. And it always reminds me that no matter even the smallest kind of most polite, most Christian, to use, because Martin Luther King's protests often did have a religious element to them because he was a pastor. Even that sort of protest, by the powers that be, it's still seen as terrifying and threatening and dangerous because, in a way, it is to their power.
Exactly, and it's why people on a person-to-person level, you could easily sit down. A member of the government could sit down with a black person, have a civil chat, but as a commodified race, as a people you are actively subjugating to maintain your power, as you've said, it harms it. It makes profit harder to come by, which is why, for instance, today corporations spend so much money trying to maintain the prison system. Coming back to what you said about the legalization of marijuana, they didn't want that to happen because suddenly they can't, they're in nice flow of black people coming into prisons goes down, making police more accountable, and ultimately scrapping, police. But even just the basic, like making the police better.
Yeah.
Making it
more surveillance,
getting rid of the white supremacists who were literally running the police, which is literally under federal investigation, for instance.
Wasn't there like a white supremacist? Like there was this, I think there was a news article that you shared about the police, there was this white supremacist that was kicked off of.
And he became like a local council security guy or something. Like it's ridiculous, and it just shows that the whole system is fundamentally corrupt. And that's ones that get reported. Like, how many people like are smarter and more aware and sort of just don't let their far right views be leaked out in the public and stuff. But like I was saying, the whole system is much worse than a lot of people like to recognize. And people don't realize that the system isn't going to fix itself, because the system has is operating on capital, on profits, and subsequently these forces of inequality and injustice, they exist for a reason. They don't exist through nature. They exist through the construction of people with power, like the creation of race, where black people suddenly go from just people with a darker skin, just like someone has darker hair or different color eyes, but they're a different race, they're different to us. Suddenly gender becomes like, men and women are strict biological realities, and you will go to our home and do our housework and raise our children, which also, by the way, makes them much wealthier, because obviously that is obviously not that biological case of like, men and women and nothing else, but it becomes convenient for people in power because suddenly they can send their wives back home to keep the house well kept and raise the kids and stuff.
It gives them more time to be on the job and
exactly
to, accumulate what they can.
And really, it's not even be on the job, because suddenly, because knowing these people, they've probably got like 1,000 people working for them.
When I say on the job, I mean, in the office with the cigar.
But on the in the pub with the mates, not even a pub, but a private bar in the super yacht.
On the private yacht.
Exactly, yeah, in the Caribbean with Steve the stockbroker and Jim the landlord.
Yeah, and like, part of me thinks that like it's kind of interesting that capitalism and strict Victorian morality around the place of a woman in society arose at similar times. Like, I almost wonder if the bourgeois mentality towards women came from the bourgeois mentality towards workers, that it makes sense to see that someone who used to be a partner be considered an inferior and a subordinate, when you see the people who are under you as also in this class.
Well, yeah, you look at how women, their classification in society, largely, or certainly as we know it today, comes from recent human history, because people weren't just inherently grouped into these two groups. In fact, in many societies around the globe, women were, just the same as men, or even on top. And it's only, our Western, what's it called? I can't remember the word, but
well, I mean, marginalization of women, is present in a ton of cultures, not just the West.
Oh, of course, yeah, but it's a Western-centric view that sort of says, in every society, men and women exist, and men are.
No, that's definitely true. If you look at, all sorts of islands and cultures around the world, especially in like the indigenous traditions on Pacific Islands and in, much of North America, we see a much more nuanced view of gender, where there are, 3 genders, 5 genders than we necessarily see from Europe. And I think that the reason so many people don't know this is because our view of gender was imposed upon these groups during, colonization.
Exactly. The Western powers have enforced their own standards upon the rest of the world. LGBTQ people, women, all marginalized groups really could be a lot further on, and we could have a lot better, situation in the system if if we didn't see the imperialism and colonialism that West did today. You see a lot of people in the West saying, "Oh, the West is so much more progressive and so much better than everyone else." But at the same time, if it weren't for the West, the people in charge now wouldn't have the situation we do.
Well, exactly. Like Africa, for instance, would not have nearly the same sort of problem with fundamentalist religion if they, weren't colonized by these European powers. Like, a lot of these pushes for, the criminalization of homosexuality in African countries is financed by fundamentalist groups in America.
Exactly. And indeed, the people who introduced the ideas of this evangelical brand of Christianity were the West in the first place. Like the erasure of LGBTQ people around the world, like the commodification of people around the globe. I'm actually getting a little bit tired, so I wondered if you wanted to have a look at the chat and see what was if there's any questions and stuff.
We can scan questions.
Yeah. First thing I've noticed is a very dead horse putting a load of rubbish in the chat, has to be said.
Well, and comms are a meme. There are different views of communism and different beliefs of different communists. Well, that is true, but I think some random geek and a very dead horse and S-Man have all been having a bit of a talk. I'm sorry, wholesome punk. People aren't dying now? Oh, either way, people die. Oh, I see. The context. Yeah, they were just making some point about how the majority of rich people don't inherit their wealth. And I mean, if no, it's not true. They do. They mostly do. But we can.
Okay, here we go. Here's something of a nonsense I was talking about. I'm obviously generalizing, but when I hear communists talk about the rich or evil capitalists, I can't help but hear Jews. It's a thing like that, comparing Nazism to communism, comparing social change and social liberation and class, the deconstruction of class to disgusting Nazism, to racial supremacism and stuff.
Yeah. Well, as if there isn't, millions of, most of the capitalist class, in fact, almost all of the capitalist class are not Jewish. Millions of Jewish workers are exploited all across the world. Obviously, anti-Semitism is a kind of racism, is a kind of tribalism that we were talking about earlier. Communism, any variant worth supporting, is anti-capitalist. I mean, is anti-Semitic as well.
But to me, there's no negative with belonging to marginalized groups like the Jewish, black people, LGBTQ people, women. Being rich, being wealthy, that's that's exploitation. That's come from the exploitation of workers by selling workers. You're going to work for me. I'm going to take the produce of your labor. If you don't like it, you're not getting the food, the house, the healthcare you need to survive. It comes from class exploitation. And the position of capitalist, that is an inherently negative and bad and exploitative role in society. For instance, look at the people in charge of Nike who are putting people in sweatshops and making them work to make themselves really rich. They're capitalists. They're people who do not need to have that role in society. The role of capitalists does not need to exist in society. It's inherently bad. And you're comparing, criticism of that role and, talk of liberation for people who are dying every day because of this role, because of this limitation of society, to Nazi erasure of people like myself and Lapis and, around the world who don't belong to the right race, the right sexuality, the right gender. It's disgraceful. And frankly, it speaks volumes to the complete lack of any awareness to what you're saying. if you're going to sit there and compare the two. It's exactly what we were talking about earlier about the person who's not got any clue about politics and is easy to sort of coerce by the far right because they see talk of workers wanting to take control of their own production and take control of the stuff they produce as the same as the Third Reich. It's nonsense, ultimately, and I don't. It
Jewish
sounds quite
people
harsh.
have done nothing except have a different religion. The capitalist class exploits people. That's inherently their role under capitalism. It's, we're critiquing a class role, not like an ethnic group. There's not really any sort of comparison that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's comparisons like that are so disingenuous because they ultimately serve to portray social change and positivity as just unique, all completely identical. Like any change to the system is just the same as any other change. Therefore, Nazism and communism are exactly the same because they both change things. When communism seeks to change class and social power, whereas Nazism is actually the same class and social power, just different elements of it are amplified to maximize commodification. Any sort of nuance and any remotely any fathom of analysis could distinguish this, but they're choosing not to. They clearly have not listened to a word that's being said throughout this, because how is someone going to have the opinion of Nazism, a system in which workers and marginalized people were commodified, like we said, to worker liberation under communism, like the end of class, the control of workplaces by the workers, is nonsense. And I don't really feel as I should give it any more. We should give it any more attention, really, because it really isn't worth discussing. Unless you wanted to say anything additionally to that, Lapis.
No, I don't think that it is. Yeah, that's one of the most silly things I've heard all day.
It is, yeah. Did you want to find a comment, Lapis?
I'm just scrolling down through all the comments right now, and
or any questions or anything?
Let's see. Oh, some random geek says on Lindsay Lohan, she is using the social capital of the situation to try to amplify her social capital in the way of capitalist marketed feminism.
Well, yeah, exactly. Market feminism, liberal feminism that upholds the status quo, which doesn't really have any impact rooted in social change, but it's designed to make people look good and to do a bit of window dressing and maybe have a woman CEO or something, or a woman in a position of power. It's still maintaining the system of patriarchy, still maintaining the divide between men and women and stuff. But ultimately not changing anything. And if because different axes of power and hegemony intersect, class, race, gender, a white wealthy woman going to a place like whereabouts in Russia was it? The bit near Georgia.
I think it was in Moscow.
Moscow, really? Okay.
May have been. It was. I can't.
I thought it was to the parts closer to, like. I thought it was.
I can search it up right now. So anyway,
anyway, a poor part of the world, going there, trotting around their wealth, expecting people to just flock to their knees, like that scene from Game of Thrones where the I don't know her name, but Dragon Lady, she goes and like there we go. Thank you. You clearly watch Game of Thrones, or you know more about it than me. Anyway, yeah, she's walking through, and like all the peasants and the poor people are, touching her hands and trying to get a glimpse of royalty and stuff. Ultimately, they have that view of themselves. They think, oh, well, people are going to love us for this. When, as we said earlier, it's insulting and rude, and pretty disgraceful when you think about it. Subsequently, these on the one hand, you've got people who genuinely believe they're doing the right thing with this, and then you've got people like Lindsay Lohan who probably have a PR team telling her to film this because it will get you lots of social attention. And
oh yeah, it was Moscow. Oh, it's thought.
Well done.
Actually, no one knows. They just know it's in Russia.
Okay. But yeah, no, it's Geek is completely right.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
No, I don't think there's anything else that really needs to be addressed.
No, okay. No other questions in the chat?
Just scrolling down. Doesn't seem to be.
Brilliant. Well, in that case, then I think we'll conclude. If that's all right.
Not at all. I mean, it's been a pleasure to be on your stream as always.
And it's been a pleasure having you, Lapis. It's been refreshing just having a chat with an intelligent lefty. Well, implying that any lefty isn't intelligent, actually. All lefties are brilliant. But no, it's been a fabulous time. Thank you very much, Lapis, for joining me. I hope to have you on again at some point.
Yeah.
And thank you to everyone who's watched. Yeah, join me next time for another great stream.